The laughter reached Sonara before she could escape it. Sharp, crystalline, deliberately pitched to carry across the Whitmore ballroom like shattered glass scattered on marble. She recognized Lady Perpetua Stratton's voice immediately, that particular blend of sweetness and venom that only the truly beautiful could wield without consequence. 40 years old, and still haunting ballrooms, like a ghost who forgot to move on. One almost admires the persistence. More laughter. Softer this time, the kind that hid behind fans and gloved hands but cut just as deep. Sonara's fingers tightened around her glass of tepid champagne. The bubbles had long since gone flat, much like the evening itself. She shouldn't have come. Her younger sister Margot had insisted, practically dragged her from their modest townhouse with promises that this season would be different, that Sonara needed to stop hiding from the world. The world, it seemed, had other plans. She set down the glass on a passing footman's tray and moved toward the edge of the ballroom, keeping her spine straight, her expression carefully neutral. 20 years of navigating society's cruelties had taught her the importance of armor, even when that armor was nothing more than posture and pride. The Whitmore Ball was the crush of the season. Every eligible lord, every ambitious mama, every diamond of the first water packed into Lord and Lady Whitmore's glittering townhouse like jewels crammed into an overflowing box. Candles blazed from 3 massive chandeliers. The scent of hothouse roses mingled with expensive perfume and the faint undertone of perspiration from 500 bodies pressed too close together. And somewhere in this glittering chaos was the Duke of Ravenmore, the most desired bachelor in all of England, possibly all of Europe. Sonara had caught only glimpses of him throughout the evening. Tall, dark-haired, surrounded constantly by a flutter of silk-clad admirers and their calculating mothers. Not that it mattered to her. She was 40 years old, the daughter of a country squire whose fortune had dwindled to almost nothing. She was here only because Margot's husband had social ambitions, and a spinster sister-in-law was apparently preferable to no connection at all. "Did you see the gown she's wearing?" Another whisper, closer now. "I believe my grandmother was buried in something similar." Sonara's jaw clenched. The gown was 5 years out of fashion, yes. The deep burgundy silk had been her mother's before consumption claimed her 3 winters past. But it was well made, carefully maintained, and it was hers. She needed air. Space. Silence. A service corridor branched off from the main hallway, half hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain, the color of aged wine. Sonara slipped through it without thinking, without checking, driven only by the desperate need to escape the whispers that followed her like hungry dogs. The corridor was narrow and dim, lit by a single candelabra mounted on the wall. It smelled of beeswax and wood polish and blessed quiet. She pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes, willing her heart to slow, her breathing to steady. 3 more hours. She only needed to survive 3 more hours, and then she could retreat to her small room in Margot's house and pretend this evening had never happened. "If you're planning to hide, you might consider somewhere less obvious." The voice came from the shadows 3 feet to her left. Sonara's eyes flew open. A man stood in the darkness of an alcove she hadn't noticed, barely visible except for the white of his cravat and the faint gleam of his eyes. He was leaning against the wall with the casual elegance of someone accustomed to owning every room he entered. "I wasn't hiding," she said, the words automatic and obviously false. "No?" Something that might have been amusement colored his tone. "Then what would you call pressing yourself against a wall in a service corridor while a ballroom full of people wonders where you've gone? Strategic retreat." "Ah." He stepped forward, and the candlelight caught his features. Strong jaw, aristocratic cheekbones, eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim light. but she suspected they were actually a deep, devastating blue. Her stomach dropped. She knew that face. Every person in England knew that face. It had been sketched in society papers, whispered about in drawing rooms, dreamed about by every unmarried woman with a pulse. Calum Aldridge, the Duke of Ravenmore. The most desired man in the kingdom was standing 3 feet away from her in a darkened corridor, and she had just accused him of hiding. "Your Grace." The words came out strangled. "I didn't realize. I should go." "Please don't." He raised one elegant hand. "You're the first person tonight who hasn't tried to thrust a daughter at me or discuss my duty to the bloodline. I find I'm enjoying the novelty." Senara stared at him. "You're hiding too." "Strategic retreat," he corrected, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Your words, I believe." Before she could respond, before she could do anything sensible like excuse herself and flee, the curtain behind her swept aside. Light flooded the corridor, sound crashed in, and Lady Perpetua Stratton stood framed in the doorway, her golden curls perfect, her ice blue gown immaculate, and her expression shifting from surprise to calculation to malicious delight in the space of a single heartbeat. "Your Grace!" she exclaimed, her voice carrying with theatrical precision. "We've been searching everywhere for you, and here you are, tucked away in the dark with—" Her gaze swept over Senara, dismissive and damning. "Company?" Behind Lady Perpetua, faces appeared. Lord Whitmore, his wife. 3 society matrons whose names Senara couldn't remember, but whose influence she knew was considerable. And behind them, a growing crowd of curious onlookers, drawn by Lady Perpetua's raised voice like moths to a particularly destructive flame. Senara's face burned. This was worse than the whispers. This was public humiliation on a scale she'd never experienced. The spinster caught in a dark corridor with the Duke of Ravenmore. It didn't matter that nothing had happened. It didn't matter that they'd exchanged barely 20 words. Society would draw its own conclusions, and those conclusions would be devastating. "Lady Perpetua," the Duke's voice had changed. Gone was the dry amusement, replaced by something cold and controlled. "How thoughtful of you to organize a search party. As you can see, I'm perfectly well." "Of course, Your Grace." Lady Perpetua's smile didn't waver, but her eyes were fixed on Senara with predatory intensity. "Though I confess, I'm curious about your companion. I don't believe we've been properly introduced." The silence stretched like a blade. Senara knew she should speak, should explain, should offer some excuse that might salvage what little remained of her reputation. But her tongue felt frozen, her mind blank with panic. Then the Duke moved. He stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Senara, in a gesture that was unmistakably protective. His hand found hers in the darkness, warm, steady, startlingly intimate, and he raised it to his lips. "Allow me," he said, his voice carrying across the watching crowd with perfect clarity. "This is Miss Senara Wycliffe, my intended." The world tilted. Senara heard gasps. She heard Lady Perpetua's sharp intake of breath. She heard the rustle of fabric as dozens of people pressed forward to witness the impossible. But mostly, she heard the rushing of blood in her ears and a single, desperate thought. What has he done? The Duke's grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. A warning, a command, a plea. She looked up into eyes that were indeed blue, the deep, fathomless blue of a winter sea, and saw something she didn't expect. Not triumph, not amusement, something closer to desperation. "Darling," he said, and the endearment was so unexpected, so wildly inappropriate, that Senara nearly laughed. "I believe we've been discovered." The next several minutes existed in fragments. Lady Whitmore's face, pale with shock. Lord Whitmore blustering about propriety and proper announcements. Lady Perpetua's expression, frozen in a rictus of disbelief that would have been satisfying if Sonara weren't equally stunned. "Intended?" Lady Perpetua repeated, her voice climbing to an undignified pitch. "Your Grace, surely you're not serious. This woman she's careful." The Duke's warning carried an edge of steel that silenced even Lady Perpetua. "That woman is the future Duchess of Ravenmore. I suggest you adjust your tone accordingly." Future Duchess. The words hit Sonara like physical blows. She was still holding his hand. Or rather, he was still holding hers. His grip firm enough to prevent her from pulling away. Her fingers had gone numb. Her mind had gone blank. This couldn't be happening. "But she's 40 years old." The exclamation burst from somewhere in the crowd, followed immediately by scandalized shushing. The Duke's expression didn't change, but Sonara felt his hand tighten fractionally around hers. "Miss Wycliffe is a woman of exceptional intelligence, uncommon grace, and remarkable beauty. Her age is an asset, not a liability. I find I have no interest in silly young girls who can discuss nothing beyond fashion and weather." Another wave of gasps. Lady Perpetua's face had gone an alarming shade of crimson. "Your Grace?" Lord Whitmore interjected, attempting diplomacy. "Perhaps this discussion would be better continued in private. My study is at your disposal." "That won't be necessary." The Duke began moving forward, pulling Sonara with him. The crowd parted instinctively, as crowds always parted for men of his stature. "Miss Wycliffe and I will take our leave. It's been an eventful evening." Eventful. Sonara wanted to laugh hysterically. Eventful was spilling wine on one's gown. Eventful was forgetting the steps to a quadrille. This was catastrophic. This was insane. This was... "Your Grace." Her voice came out as a whisper. "Please. I don't understand what's happening." He didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed ahead, navigating them through the crowd with practiced efficiency. "Not here. We'll speak in the carriage." "But my sister. I came with my sister. I can't simply..." "Your sister will be informed." They'd reached the main entrance. Footmen scrambled to attention. Someone called for the Duke's carriage. The night air hit Sonara's flushed face like cold water. "You'll stay with my family tonight. Everything else can be sorted tomorrow. Stay with your family." She dug in her heels, forcing him to stop. "Your Grace, I don't know you. You don't know me. You just told 500 people that we're engaged, and I have absolutely no idea why." For the first time since they'd been discovered, he looked at her directly. The intensity in his gaze stole her breath. Up close, without the dim lighting of the corridor, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the hint of silver at his temples, the exhaustion that lurked beneath his controlled expression. He was older than she'd initially thought. Not 40, perhaps, but close to it. "Miss Wycliffe." His voice dropped low, pitched for her ears alone. In approximately 3 hours, Lady Perpetua Stratton was going to announce her engagement to me. An arrangement orchestrated by my grandmother without my knowledge or consent. I've been trying to escape it for months. Sonara blinked. "And I'm your escape?" "You're my opportunity." A muscle flexed in his jaw. "I apologize for the presumption. But when I saw you in that corridor, when I heard what those women were saying about you, I saw a chance to solve both our problems. Both our problems. They were going to destroy you." His words were blunt, unapologetic. "Whatever you intended by hiding in that corridor, the moment Lady Perpetua found us together, your reputation was finished. You would have been ruined by morning. At least this way. This way, I'm engaged to a stranger instead of ruined." Sonara's laugh was bitter. How generous. His expression flickered. Regret crossed his features. I'm not asking you to actually marry me. I'm asking you to play along for a few months, long enough to convince my grandmother that I'm unavailable, long enough for Lady Perpetua to set her sights elsewhere. Then we end things quietly, amicably, and you walk away with connections and references that could change your entire life. The carriage arrived, black lacquer gleaming in the torchlight, the Ravenmoor crest emblazoned on the door in silver and gold. "Get in," the Duke said quietly. "Please. My grandmother's spies are everywhere, and we need to establish our story before we face her." Every rational thought screamed at Sonara to refuse. This was madness. This was dangerous. This was so far beyond improper that she couldn't even calculate the social mathematics. But she thought of Lady Perpetua's cruel laughter. She thought of 20 years of whispers and pity and invitations that dried up one by one. She thought of her small room in Margot's house, growing smaller every day. She got in the carriage. The interior was warm, lit by a small oil lamp that cast dancing shadows across velvet seats the color of midnight. The Duke settled across from her, and the door closed with a heavy finality that made Sonara's heart pound. "Start talking," she said. "Everything. From the beginning." He studied her for a moment, and respect flickered in his eyes. "My father died 8 months ago," he began. "Since then, my grandmother has been relentless. She believes the title requires an heir immediately. She's paraded every eligible woman in England through Ravenmoor House. Lady Perpetua is her current favorite, well-bred, wealthy, and connected. And apparently beautiful," Sonara added flatly. "Beauty without substance is merely decoration." The Duke's voice held an edge of contempt. "Lady Perpetua has the depth of a teaspoon and the warmth of a January frost. My grandmother doesn't care. She sees only bloodlines and alliances." "So you've been trying to avoid this marriage?" "For months. Every excuse, every delay. Nothing has worked." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Tonight was supposed to be the end. Lady Perpetua was going to announce our engagement during the midnight supper. My grandmother arranged everything without my final consent, assuming I'd simply accept rather than cause a public scene. And then you found me. And then I found you. His gaze held hers. A woman hiding from cruelty. A woman with dignity in her posture, despite wearing a gown 5 years out of fashion. A woman who looked at me with absolutely no interest in my title or fortune. Sonara's cheeks warmed. I was more concerned with not being sick from panic. "Exactly." For the first time, a genuine smile crossed his features. It transformed his face, softening the harsh angles, revealing a warmth she hadn't expected. "You saw a man, not a title. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The carriage lurched into motion. Through the window, Sonara watched the Whitmore townhouse disappear behind them, her old life disappearing too. "Your grandmother," she said slowly. "She won't simply accept this." "No," the Duke agreed. "She'll fight. She'll investigate you. She'll try to destroy this arrangement by any means necessary. And Lady Perpetua will be a more immediate problem." His jaw tightened. "She's not accustomed to losing. She'll come for you with everything she has." Sonara absorbed this. 2 powerful enemies. A fake engagement. A Duke she'd met less than an hour ago. And somewhere out there, her sister Margot was probably having hysterics. "I must be insane," she murmured. "Perhaps." The Duke extended his hand. "But sometimes madness is the only rational choice. Do we have an agreement, Miss Wycliffe?" She looked at his outstretched hand. Strong fingers. An elegant signet ring. The hand of a man who could destroy her or save her, and she had no idea which it would be. "I have conditions," she heard herself say. His eyebrow rose. Conditions. The Duke's tone was unreadable. You're negotiating with me. You need me as much as I apparently need you. Sonara straightened her spine, channeling every lesson her mother had ever taught her about dealing with difficult men. That makes us equals in this arrangement, regardless of our respective titles. The carriage swayed as it rounded a corner. Outside, London's streets flickered past, gas lamps and shadows, late-night revelers and watchful footmen. Inside, the silence stretched taut as a harp string. Then, impossibly, the Duke laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised, almost rusty, as if he'd forgotten how. You're remarkable. Has anyone ever told you that? I've been called many things, Your Grace. Remarkable isn't typically among them. Then everyone you've known has been remarkably unobservant. He settled back against the seat, his posture relaxing fractionally. Very well, Miss Wycliffe. Name your conditions. Sonara had been forming them since the corridor, perhaps even before that, in some dark corner of her mind where practicality lived alongside hope. First, she began, I want complete honesty between us. If your grandmother discovers something about my past, if Lady Perpetua finds some weapon to use against me, I want to know before they strike. No secrets that could blindside me. Agreed. And in return, I expect the same. My grandmother will dig into every corner of your history. If there's anything she might find, there's nothing scandalous. Sonara's voice hardened slightly. I've lived a quiet life, too quiet for scandal. My father was a country squire who lost his fortune through bad investments and worse timing. My mother died 3 years ago. My brother manages what's left of the estate badly. I've spent the last decade helping him, helping my sister, helping everyone except myself. She paused. There's no secret lover, no hidden child, no ruinous indiscretion, just a woman who ran out of options and time. A change crossed the Duke's features. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. Second, Sonara continued, I want my family protected from whatever storm this creates. My sister Margot, she has social ambitions. Her husband is climbing, and a scandal attached to me could damage them. If this arrangement goes badly, your family will be insulated. The Duke's voice was firm. I'll ensure your sister's position is not only protected, but enhanced. By the time this ends, her husband will have received introductions that would otherwise take him years to acquire. Sonara nodded slowly. Third, when this ends, and it will end, I want something real. Not just references, though I'll need those. I want a position, a genuine opportunity, a life that's mine, not borrowed from someone else's charity. The Duke was silent for a long moment. His gaze traced her features, not with assessment, but with something that looked almost like admiration. You don't want money, he observed. Money runs out, connections fade. But a position, work that's valued, that's independence. Most women in your situation would ask for a settlement, a house, an income. Most women in my situation haven't spent 40 years learning exactly how precarious generosity can be. Sonara met his eyes directly. I've watched my father depend on friends who disappeared when his fortune did. I've watched my sister's charity curdle into resentment. I don't want to be anyone's obligation, Your Grace. I want to earn my future. The carriage slowed. Through the window, Sonara glimpsed massive iron gates, stone walls, and the looming silhouette of a house that seemed to occupy half the street. Ravenmore House, her temporary home, her gilded cage. You have my word, the Duke said quietly. All 3 conditions. I'll draw up papers if you require them. Your word is sufficient. She wasn't sure why she believed him, but she did. And what do you require from me? Play the part convincingly. Attend the necessary functions. Let society believe this is real. He hesitated. And perhaps, be honest with me, as I'll be with you. I find I'm rather starved for honest conversation. The admission surprised her. This man, this powerful, desired, untouchable Duke, was lonely. She could hear it beneath the careful words, see it in the shadows under his eyes. I can do that, she said. The carriage stopped. Footmen materialized to open doors. And then they were stepping into the cold night air, facing the towering facade of Ravenmore House and whatever waited within. There's something you should know before we go inside. The Duke's voice dropped low. My grandmother is still awake. She always is when I'm out for the evening. She'll have received word about the Whitmore ball by now. Word travels that quickly. Her spies are exceptionally efficient. His mouth twisted. She'll want to see you immediately, assess you, find weaknesses. Sonara thought of Lady Perpetua's cruelty, of 20 years of social slights, of the whispers that followed her everywhere, like persistent ghosts. Let her try, she said. The Duke offered his arm. I was hoping you'd say that. They ascended the steps together. The door opened before they reached it, revealing a cavernous entrance hall lit by a crystal chandelier that could have fed a village for a year. Marble floors, priceless paintings, a sweeping staircase that seemed to climb toward heaven itself. And at the base of that staircase, a woman waited. She was perhaps 70, but age had not softened her. Silver hair swept back from a face that might have been carved from ice. Eyes the same devastating blue as her grandson's, but colder. Sharper. She wore black silk and diamonds that caught the candlelight like frozen tears. The Dowager Duchess of Ravenmore. Calum, her voice cut through the vast space. You've been busy this evening. Grandmother. The Duke's arm tensed beneath Sonara's fingers. May I present Miss Sonara Wycliffe, my future wife? The Dowager's gaze shifted to Sonara. Slow, deliberate, missing nothing. Wife. She tasted the word like something sour. How extraordinary. I wasn't aware you were even acquainted with anyone named Wycliffe. We've been corresponding for some months, the Duke said smoothly. Through a mutual connection. I wanted to be certain before making any announcements. And yet you announced tonight, at the Whitmore ball, where Lady Perpetua was expecting a rather different declaration. The silence that followed was suffocating. Grandmother, I'm not finished. The Dowager descended 2 steps, bringing her closer, her diamonds swaying with each movement. You've caused a scandal. Lady Perpetua's mother is already sending messengers. The Whitmore ball is in chaos, and you've brought home a woman nobody has ever heard of, claiming she's your intended. She is my intended. She's 40 years old. I'm aware of her age. She has no fortune, no connections, no particular beauty. The Dowager's eyes remained fixed on Sonara. No offense intended, Miss Wycliffe. None taken, Your Grace. Sonara was surprised by how steady her voice emerged. Though I might dispute the assessment of my beauty, my mother always said I had excellent bone structure. Silence. Then, impossibly, a twitch at the corner of the Dowager's lips. Excellent bone structure, she repeated. How wonderfully pragmatic. She descended the remaining steps, moving closer until she stood directly before Sonara. Do you love my grandson, Miss Wycliffe? The question was a trap. Sonara could feel the edges of it, sharp and waiting. I admire him, she said carefully. I respect him. I believe we could build something meaningful together. But do you love him? Sonara met those cold blue eyes without flinching. I've learned that love is a luxury, Your Grace. Companionship, respect, shared purpose. These are the foundations that last. Love, if it comes, grows from such foundations. It cannot be manufactured or performed. The dowager studied her for an endless moment. Behind them, servants hovered in doorways, trying to look invisible while drinking in every word. The Duke stood rigid beside Sonara, barely breathing. 40 years old, the dowager said finally. No fortune, no connections, wearing a gown that was fashionable during the last king's reign. She paused. And yet, you stand before me without trembling, matching my gaze, speaking of pragmatism and foundations. Would you prefer I tremble? I would prefer honesty, Miss Wycliffe. I suspect you're capable of it, which is more than I can say for most young women my grandson encounters. I've never been accused of being a young woman, Your Grace. Another twitch of those thin lips. No, I don't suppose you have. The dowager turned to her grandson. This is madness, Calum. You know that. I know what I want. You want to escape Lady Perpetua. This woman is merely a convenient shield. This woman, the Duke said quietly, is standing right here, and I would appreciate you treating her with the respect she deserves. Surprise flickered across the dowager's features. Very well. She stepped back. Miss Wycliffe will stay in the blue suite. I'll have tea sent up. Her gaze returned to Sonara, sharp as a blade. We'll speak again tomorrow, Miss Wycliffe. Alone. I have questions, and I expect honest answers. I wouldn't dream of offering anything else, Your Grace. The dowager nodded once, curtly, then swept up the staircase without another word. The Duke released a breath. Beside him, Sonara felt her own shoulders drop slightly. That went better than expected, he murmured. That was better than expected. She didn't threaten to have you thrown out. His mouth curved slightly. With my grandmother, that's practically a warm welcome. A young woman appeared from somewhere in the house's depths, dark-haired and bright-eyed, and practically vibrating with curiosity. She looked perhaps 19 or 20, with the Duke's aristocratic features softened into something warmer, more approachable. Calum! She threw herself at the Duke, who caught her with the ease of long practice. Is it true? Everyone's talking about it. Lady Whitmore's footman told Cook, who told Mrs. Henderson, who told me. You proposed to someone at the ball. Odette. The Duke disentangled himself gently. May I present Miss Sonara Wycliffe. Miss Wycliffe, my sister, Lady Odette Aldrich. Odette's gaze swung to Sonara, and her face lit up with unfiltered delight. Oh, you're wonderful. You're not 20 and simpering and desperate to discuss ribbon colors. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. Odette. But Odette had already seized Sonara's hands, squeezing them with genuine warmth. I've been praying he'd find someone with actual substance. Every woman grandmother parades through here is exactly the same. Pretty and empty and frightened of saying anything interesting. You're not frightened at all, are you? I'm somewhat frightened, Sonara admitted, but you're hiding it brilliantly. Odette beamed. I knew I'd like you. I knew it the moment I heard. 40 years old, and she still captured the Duke of Ravenmore. Society must be losing their minds. Odette. The Duke's voice carried a warning. Oh, don't Odette me. I'm delighted. Finally, some excitement in this mausoleum. She looped her arm through Sonara's. Come. I'll show you to your rooms. You must tell me everything. How did you meet? What did grandmother say? Did Lady Perpetua actually faint? Or is that just wishful thinking? Sonara glanced back at the Duke, who stood at the base of the stairs, looking somehow both exhausted and amused. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything tonight. Thank me tomorrow, he replied, after you've survived breakfast with my grandmother. Odette tugged her toward the staircase, chattering about room arrangements and dress fittings and society events. Sonara let herself be pulled along, overwhelmed and alarmed and, strangely, unexpectedly hopeful. Tomorrow, reality would crash in. The questions, the scrutiny, and the battle she'd agreed to fight. But tonight, climbing the endless stairs of Ravenmore House with the Duke's sister chattering beside her, Senara allowed herself a single, dangerous thought. Perhaps this time, things would be different. She just didn't know yet how much was about to change. The blue suite was larger than the entire upper floor of Margot's townhouse. Senara stood in the center of the bedroom, turning slowly to absorb the impossibility of it all. Silk wallpaper, the color of a summer sky. A 4-poster bed draped in velvet and trimmed with silver thread. A writing desk positioned beside windows that overlooked what appeared to be an extensive garden, though the darkness revealed only shadows and moonlight. A sitting room adjoined the bedroom. Beyond that, a dressing room. Beyond that, a private bathing chamber with a copper tub large enough to swim in. "It's too much," she murmured. "It's the smallest guest suite," Odette said cheerfully, flopping onto a chaise lounge with the casual disregard of someone who'd grown up surrounded by such luxury. "Grandmother wanted to put you in the servants' quarters, but Calum insisted. The servants' quarters might have been more appropriate." "Nonsense. You're the future Duchess. You need to start practicing." Future Duchess. The word still felt absurd, like a costume that didn't quite fit. A knock at the door announced the arrival of a maid, a young woman with copper hair and kind eyes, who introduced herself as Fennec. She carried a tray laden with tea, delicate sandwiches, and pastries that looked too beautiful to eat. "His Grace thought you might be hungry, miss," Fennec said, setting the tray on a small table. "And he asked me to deliver this." She handed Senara a folded note. The paper was heavy, expensive, sealed with the Ravenmore crest. Senara broke the seal and read, "Miss Wycliffe, tomorrow will be difficult. My grandmother will interrogate you at breakfast, likely around 9. Before then, I suggest we establish the details of our supposed courtship, how we met, how long we've been corresponding, what drew us together. Consistency will be essential. I'll be in the library at 7 if you're willing. Also, I've sent word to your sister. She's been informed you're safe and will be staying as my family's guest. I've promised a formal explanation tomorrow afternoon. Sleep well. You'll need it." Ravenmore Senara read the note twice, then tucked it into her reticule. "What does it say?" Odette asked, shameless in her curiosity. "That I should sleep, which I suspect will be impossible. Then we'll talk instead." Odette sat up, tucking her legs beneath her. "Tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? What do you enjoy? How did you truly meet my brother? Because I know the correspondence story is nonsense." Senara hesitated. Odette's warmth seemed genuine, but this house was full of traps. The Dowager's spies, Lady Perpetua's inevitable machinations. Even kindness could be a weapon if wielded correctly. But exhaustion won over caution. "We met tonight," Senara admitted. "In a corridor. I was hiding from cruel women, and your brother was hiding from Lady Perpetua." Odette's eyes widened, then she burst into delighted laughter. "I knew it. I knew there was no correspondence. Calum can barely manage to write thank-you notes, let alone conduct a secret courtship." She leaned forward eagerly. "So he just proposed? On the spot? He claimed I was his intended to prevent a scandal. Lady Perpetua had found us alone together. It would have destroyed my reputation. And saved his from being shackled to that viper." Odette nodded sagely. "Clever. Desperate and mad, but clever. You don't seem surprised. By Calum doing something dramatic and impulsive?" Odette snorted. "He's been wound tighter than a clock spring since Father died. I've been waiting for him to snap. I just Didn't expect it to be quite so romantic. There's nothing romantic about it. This is an arrangement, a performance. All the best romances start that way. Odette's smile turned knowing. The question is how they end. Before Sonara could respond, another knock interrupted them. This time, it was a footman with a message. The Duke requested Miss Wycliffe's presence in the library. Now, if convenient. Go, Odette urged. I'll still be here when you return. We have so much to discuss. Sonara followed the footman through hallways that seemed designed to intimidate. Portraits of stern Aldridge ancestors watched her pass. Marble busts, priceless vases. Every surface gleamed with the careful attention of an army of servants. The library doors were massive oak, carved with ravens in flight, the Ravenmore family symbol. The footman opened them, announced her, and retreated. The Duke stood by the fireplace, still in his evening clothes, though he'd removed his jacket and loosened his cravat. He looked younger this way, more human, less like the untouchable aristocrat, and more like a man who desperately needed sleep. Miss Wycliffe. He gestured to a pair of chairs positioned before the fire. Thank you for coming. Your note suggested urgency. My grandmother suggested breakfast at 9. That gives us limited time to construct a believable history. He waited until she sat before taking the opposite chair. I thought we should discuss specifics. The correspondence story. It's the most plausible. He steepled his fingers. A mutual connection introduced us through letters. We discovered shared interests. The correspondence deepened into affection. When you came to London for the season, we met in person and confirmed what the letters had suggested. Which mutual connection? Sir Bartholomew Vance. He's dead now. Consumption. Last spring. So he can't contradict us. He was a friend of my father's, and a known eccentric who collected correspondence the way others collect butterflies. Sonara absorbed this. And what shared interests drew us together? Books. The Duke's gaze flickered to the shelves surrounding them. Philosophy. History. You mentioned pragmatism to my grandmother. We can build on that. I do enjoy reading. It won't be entirely a lie. Good. The best deceptions contain truth. He paused. What else should I know about you? Genuinely? Things that might come up. Sonara considered. I speak passable French and terrible Italian. I play piano adequately but sing poorly. I prefer gardens to ballrooms. And I've never been comfortable with small talk. Neither have I. His expression softened. What about your past? Any previous attachments my grandmother might discover? The question shouldn't have stung, but it did. There was someone. Once. A long time ago. Sonara kept her voice neutral. A gentleman who seemed interested. We walked together. Talked. I thought perhaps, what happened? His family arranged a better match. Someone younger. Wealthier. More suitable. She shrugged, as if the memory didn't still ache. I was 23. After that, options became limited. The Duke was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me valuable lessons about expectation and reality. And yet, here you are, agreeing to another performance, another arrangement that may end in disappointment. Here I am, Sonara agreed, making a calculated risk because the alternative was worse. Their eyes met across the firelight. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps. Recognition. Two people who'd learned that hope could be dangerous, yet couldn't quite abandon it entirely. I have one more condition, Sonara said quietly. The Duke raised an eyebrow. Another? The moment this arrangement no longer serves us both, we end it. No prolonging for convenience. No pretending past the point of reason. We agree now on honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable. He studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Agreed. Honesty. even when uncomfortable. She took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. "Then we have an understanding," Senara said. "We have a beginning." The Duke released her hand and stood. "You should rest. Tomorrow, the real performance begins." She rose, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how the firelight caught the angles of his face, how his eyes seemed to hold depths she hadn't expected. "Thank you," she said, "for everything tonight, even if it was madness. Especially because it was madness." His mouth curved slightly. "Good night, Miss Wycliffe." "Good night, Your Grace." She left the library carrying the warmth of his hand against her palm, and the unsettling realization that this arrangement might be more dangerous than she'd anticipated. Not because of society's cruelty or the Dowager's opposition, but because the Duke of Ravenmore was nothing like she'd expected. And that unnerved her most of all. Morning arrived with a gentle knock and the scent of fresh flowers. Senara opened her eyes to find Fennec arranging a breakfast tray on the table by the window, sunlight streaming through the curtains to illuminate a room that looked even more impossibly luxurious by day. "Good morning, miss." Fennec's smile was warm. "His Grace suggested you might prefer breakfast in your rooms before facing the household. Cook prepared your favorites, or what she guessed might be your favorites, based on Lady Odette's description." Senara sat up slowly, her body aching from a night of fitful sleep. "What time is it?" "Just past 7, miss. His Grace is in the library whenever you're ready." 7. 2 hours before the Dowager's interrogation. 2 hours to prepare for battle. The breakfast tray held tea, toast with marmalade, soft-boiled eggs, and a small vase of violets that seemed too delicate for this intimidating house. Senara ate mechanically, her mind churning through possibilities and pitfalls. Fennec helped her dress in a morning gown that had appeared mysteriously overnight, pale blue muslin that fit perfectly, far more fashionable than anything Senara owned. "Lady Odette had it sent over from the modiste this morning," Fennec explained at Senara's questioning look. "She said you'd need proper clothes while yours are being prepared." "Prepared?" "The modiste is coming this afternoon, miss. Madame Lefebvre. She's the best in London. Lady Odette insisted you needed an entirely new wardrobe." "An entirely new wardrobe, new dresses, new accessories, a new life, constructed from silk and deception." Senara descended to the library, with her heart hammering against her ribs. The Duke was waiting, dressed impeccably in dark blue that matched his eyes, papers spread across a desk that could have doubled as a dining table. "You look rested," he said, which they both knew was a lie. "You look like you didn't sleep at all." "Guilty." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I've been constructing our timeline. Would you like to review it?" For the next hour, they built a fiction from fragments. Letters exchanged beginning 8 months ago. Topics discussed: philosophy, literature, the state of modern society. Feelings that deepened gradually, cautiously. Two people afraid of disappointment, finding unexpected connection through written words. "When did the correspondence turn romantic?" Senara asked. 4 months ago. You wrote about loneliness. I responded with honesty I hadn't offered anyone since my father's death." The Duke's voice was matter-of-fact, but something flickered in his gaze. "We agreed to meet in person during the season. Tonight was our first face-to-face encounter." "And you proposed immediately?" "I knew within moments that the letters hadn't lied, that you were everything I'd hoped." He paused. "That's what we'll tell my grandmother, at least." The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither acknowledged. At 8:30, Odette burst into the library with the energy of a summer storm. "You're still here." "Excellent. I've arranged everything for this afternoon. Madame Lefebvre is coming at 2. I've also sent word to Lady Harrington about the Pemberton Musicale. She's a terrible gossip, but excellent for spreading the right kind of rumors. And Odette, the Duke's voice carried patient affection. Breathe. I can't breathe. This is the most exciting thing that's happened since Father died, and I'm determined to manage it properly. She turned to Sonara. How are you feeling? Anxious? Exhilarated? Both? Both, Sonara admitted. Perfect. That's exactly right. Odette seized her hands. Grandmother will try to break you. Don't let her. You're stronger than you look, I can tell. Just remember, she respects courage more than submission, even if she'd never admit it. Lady Odette speaks from experience, the Duke added dryly. She's been defying our grandmother since she learned to walk. Someone had to. Odette's grin was unrepentant. Now, breakfast. The dining room. Grandmother will be there precisely at 9, and we cannot be late. The dining room was a monument to aristocratic excess. A table that could seat 40 stretched beneath a ceiling, painted with pastoral scenes. Crystal chandeliers, silver candelabras, more flowers, more paintings, more overwhelming evidence that Sonara had stumbled into a world where she didn't belong. The Dowager Duchess sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. She wore dove gray this morning, her silver hair arranged with military precision, her diamonds replaced by a single strand of pearls that probably cost more than Sonara's childhood home. Good morning. The Dowager's voice betrayed nothing. I trust you slept well, Miss Wycliffe. Very well, Your Grace. The blue suite is extraordinarily comfortable. It should be. I selected the furnishings myself 40 years ago. The Dowager gestured to the seat at her right. Sit. We have much to discuss. Breakfast was served with silent efficiency. Eggs, bacon, toast, fruits, pastries. More food than Sonara had seen in months, arranged with artistic precision on plates trimmed in gold. She ate carefully, aware of the Dowager's gaze tracking every movement. The Duke sat at the table's far end, close enough to observe but too far to intervene. Odette occupied the space between, chattering brightly about nothing, filling the silence with words that seemed designed to deflect her grandmother's attention. It didn't work. Miss Wycliffe, the Dowager's voice cut through Odette's monologue. My grandson tells me you've been corresponding for 8 months. That's correct, Your Grace. Through Sir Bartholomew Vance's introduction. Yes. How convenient that Sir Bartholomew is no longer with us to confirm this. Sonara met the Dowager's gaze directly. Death is rarely convenient, Your Grace, but Sir Bartholomew was a generous man who enjoyed connecting people through letters. He believed correspondence revealed character more honestly than conversation. Did he? The Dowager's eyes narrowed. And what did my grandson's correspondence reveal about his character? That he's thoughtful, careful with his words, that he carries grief he rarely discusses and responsibility he never complains about, that beneath the title and the expectations, he's a man looking for genuine connection in a world that offers mostly performance. Silence fell across the table. The Duke had gone very still. Odette's chatter had ceased entirely. Even the footmen seemed frozen. Interesting. The Dowager set down her teacup with deliberate precision. You speak of him as if you actually know him. I've read his letters, Your Grace. Dozens of them. A person reveals themselves through writing in ways they never intend. And what have you revealed, Miss Wycliffe? Through your letters? Sonara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. That I'm pragmatic, that I've learned to survive disappointment without becoming bitter, that I value honesty over flattery and substance over appearance, that I'm 40 years old, unmarried, and perfectly aware of how unusual this situation appears. Unusual? The Dowager's laugh was cold. That's one word for it. It's the most polite word, Your Grace. I'm certain you have others. Another long silence. Odette looked like she wanted to dive under the table. The Duke's expression had become utterly unreadable. Then the Dowager nodded slowly. "You have courage, Miss Wycliffe. I'll grant you that." She rose from her seat. "We'll continue this conversation after lunch, alone." She swept from the room, leaving devastation in her wake. Odette exhaled explosively. "That was magnificent. How are you still conscious?" Senara's hands were shaking beneath the table. "Practice. 20 years of social cruelty provides excellent training." "You were superb." This from the Duke, who had crossed the room to stand beside her chair. "I've never seen anyone match my grandmother, word for word like that. I don't know if matching her is wise. It's the only approach that works." His hand brushed her shoulder. Brief, steadying. "She destroys weakness. Strength she respects." Senara looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close he stood, how his eyes had warmed with something that looked almost like admiration. "Then I suppose I'll have to keep being strong," she said. "I don't think that will be a problem." His mouth curved slightly. "Welcome to Ravenmore House, Miss Wycliffe. The hard part starts now." Lunch passed in a blur of anxiety. Odette attempted distraction, dragging Senara through a tour of the house that revealed room after impossible room. A music room with a gilded piano, a conservatory filled with exotic plants, a gallery displaying 3 centuries of Aldridge portraits, each face more severe than the last. "That's Father," Odette said quietly, stopping before a portrait of a man with kind eyes and the Duke's aristocratic features. "He died 8 months ago. Suddenly. His heart," the doctors said. "I'm sorry. Calum was in Scotland when it happened. Business, that couldn't wait," Father insisted. Odette's voice carried old pain. "He didn't make it back in time. I think that's what broke something in him. Not the death itself, but the absence. Not being here when it mattered." Senara thought of her own father, watching his fortune crumble, his spirit following shortly after. Different losses, but the same hollow grief. "Your grandmother wants him to marry quickly," she said. "Is that about heirs or something else?" "Both." "Neither." Odette shrugged. "She thinks he's wasting away, burying himself in duty and papers to avoid feeling anything. She's not entirely wrong. But her solution, Lady Perpetua, social obligations, the weight of expectation, it would crush him entirely." "And you think I'm different?" "I think you're unexpected." Odette turned to face her. "Calum doesn't do unexpected. He plans, controls, manages. But last night he saw you and acted on impulse. I haven't seen him act on impulse since Father died." Before Senara could respond, a footman appeared. The Dowager was ready for their private conversation. The Dowager's sitting room was smaller than Senara expected, though no less intimidating. Rose-colored walls, a portrait of a younger Dowager above the fireplace, beautiful and imperious. 2 chairs positioned across from each other like opposing thrones. "Sit," the Dowager gestured. "And drop the performance. It's just us now." Senara sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "You're not what I expected," the Dowager began. "When Calum announced his intentions last night, I assumed you were some calculating adventuress who'd trapped him through feminine wiles. But you're not, are you?" "I'm not sure what I am, Your Grace." "You're a woman who stumbled into an opportunity and was clever enough to seize it." The Dowager's gaze was piercing. "The question is what you intend to do with it. Survive? Help your grandson escape an unwanted marriage? And perhaps, in the process, build something better for myself?" Honesty. How refreshing. The Dowager leaned back. "Tell me about the man who abandoned you. The one you loved at 23. Senara's breath caught. "How did you? I have excellent sources, Miss Wycliffe. I know about your father's failed investments, your brother's gambling debts, your sister's social climbing. I know you've spent 2 decades caring for everyone except yourself, and I know you secretly fear this arrangement will end exactly as badly as everything else in your life. Each word landed like a blow. Sonara felt stripped bare, exposed, every vulnerability dragged into the light. His name was Edmund Fairfax, she said quietly. He was the second son of a viscount. Charming, attentive. He made me believe I was worth something beyond my circumstances. And then? His family arranged a match with an heiress. He married her 3 months after our last conversation. I learned about the engagement from a society paper. Sonara's voice hardened. He didn't even have the decency to tell me himself. Did you love him? I thought I did. I was young enough to believe that love was enough. And now? Now I know better. Sonara met the dowager's gaze. Love is a luxury, Your Grace. Security, respect, purpose, those are what matter. I don't need your grandson to love me. I need this arrangement to work long enough to change my circumstances. The dowager was silent for a long moment. You remind me of myself, she said finally. 60 years ago, I was in a similar position. A minor aristocrat's daughter with no fortune, chosen by a duke for reasons that baffled everyone, including myself. What happened? I made myself indispensable. I learned everything about running a ducal household, managing social obligations, navigating political waters. By the time my husband died, I was more Ravenmore than Aldrich. The dowager's voice softened almost imperceptibly. It wasn't love at first, but it became something stronger, something that lasted. Is that what you want for your grandson? I want him to live. The words carried unexpected emotion. He's been dying since his father's death. Slowly, quietly, retreating into duty until there's nothing left of the man he used to be. Lady Perpetua would finish the job. All performance, no substance, suffocating him with propriety until he's nothing but a title with a heartbeat. And you think I'm different? I think you're a risk. The dowager's eyes sharpened. You could save him, or you could destroy him. The question is which one you'll choose. Sonara's heart hammered. I don't want to destroy anyone. Then prove it. The dowager rose, crossing to a small writing desk. I won't pretend to support this match. Society would see through such obvious falsity, but I won't actively oppose it either. Yet. You have until the Harrington Ball, 6 weeks from now, to convince me this arrangement has genuine potential. And if I fail, then I'll ensure this charade ends quickly and quietly, with minimal damage to the family name. The dowager turned back, her expression cold. Don't mistake my restraint for acceptance, Miss Wycliffe. I've destroyed women far more formidable than you. I don't doubt it, Your Grace. Good. The dowager moved toward the door. One more thing. My grandson is grieving. He's vulnerable in ways he'd never admit. If you exploit that vulnerability, if you manipulate his emotions for personal gain, I will know. And I will make you regret ever stepping foot in this house. I understand. Do you? The dowager paused at the threshold. Edmund Fairfax broke your heart 20 years ago. Don't let the memory of that pain drive you to break someone else's. She left without waiting for a response. Sonara sat alone in the rose-colored room, her hands finally trembling openly. The dowager had stripped away every defense, exposed every wound, and made clear exactly how precarious her position was. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to prove herself. 6 weeks to navigate a world that had spent 40 years rejecting her. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something that felt almost like determination. The dowager expected her to fail, Lady Perpetua expected her to crumble. Society expected her to retreat to whatever obscurity she'd emerged from. Sonara had spent her entire life exceeding low expectations. She wasn't about to stop now. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Fennec appeared, looking slightly breathless. "Miss Wycliffe, you're needed downstairs. Madame Lefebvre has arrived for your fitting, and—" She hesitated. "There's also a visitor, a Lady Perpetua Stratton. She's demanding to see you." Sonara's blood ran cold. Demanding? She's in the drawing room with Lady Odette. His Grace is in a meeting and can't be interrupted. Fennec's expression conveyed everything her words didn't. "Lady Odette asked me to warn you that the lady seems displeased." Displeased. Such a mild word for what was certainly coming. Sonara rose, smoothing her borrowed gown with hands that had finally stopped shaking. "Then we shouldn't keep her waiting," she said, and walked toward whatever battle awaited. Lady Perpetua Stratton sat in the drawing room like a queen, awaiting tribute. She wore pale pink silk that complemented her golden curls perfectly, her posture so refined, it made Sonara's borrowed gown feel like servant's rags. Odette stood near the window, her expression caught between fury and fear. "Miss Wycliffe," Lady Perpetua didn't rise. "How kind of you to finally appear." "Lady Perpetua." Sonara curtsied with the same precision her mother had drilled into her decades ago. "I wasn't expecting visitors." "I'm certain you weren't." Perpetua's smile was sharp as broken crystal. "I simply couldn't wait another moment to meet the woman who stole my fiancé. I wasn't aware His Grace was your fiancé." An understanding existed. Everyone knew it. Perpetua's composure cracked slightly. "We were to announce at the Whitmore ball. Plans had been made. Invitations were being prepared." "Plans made without His Grace's consent, from what I understand." The silence that followed was dangerous. "You think you've won something," Perpetua said softly. "A duke, a title, a place in society that your breeding never entitled you to. But you should know, I don't surrender easily." "Neither do I." Perpetua rose, her movements fluid with practiced grace. "You're 40 years old, Miss Wycliffe. No fortune, no family of significance. You've spent your entire life being overlooked and pitied. Do you honestly believe a man like Calum Aldridge could genuinely want you?" The words struck exactly where they were aimed, at every insecurity Sonara had carried for 20 years. "I believe," Sonara said slowly, "that His Grace is capable of making his own decisions. His Grace is vulnerable, grieving, easily manipulated by someone who knows how to appear sympathetic." Perpetua moved closer, her voice dropping to a murmur. "Enjoy your fantasy while it lasts. When it crumbles, and it will, I'll be waiting." She swept from the room without another word, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and threat in her wake. Odette rushed to Sonara's side. "Are you all right?" "That was vile. She's absolutely vile. She's frightened." Sonara's voice was steadier than she felt. "Frightened people are dangerous. Calum needs to know about this." "No." The word came out sharp. "He has enough to manage without fighting my battles. I can handle Lady Perpetua." Odette studied her with newfound respect. "You really aren't afraid of her, are you?" "I'm alarmed by her." Sonara managed a thin smile. "But I've learned not to let fear stop me from functioning." The days that followed established a pattern. Mornings began with breakfast, under the dowager's watchful eye. Each meal a careful performance of composure and wit. Afternoons brought dress fittings, social calls, and the overwhelming work of constructing a duchess from nothing. And evenings? Evenings belonged to the library. It started accidentally. Sonara had gone searching for something to read, unable to sleep, and found the Duke already there. They'd talked until dawn about nothing of consequence. Favorite books, childhood memories, the peculiar loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw only what they wanted to see. After that, the library became their refuge. "Tell me about your father," Calum said one evening, 3 weeks into her stay. The fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows across walls, lined with leather-bound volumes. "Which version?" Senara curled deeper into her chair. "The one before the failure, or after?" "Both." She was quiet for a moment, gathering memories she rarely examined. Before, he was magnificent, full of plans and energy, always certain the next venture would succeed, even when the previous one hadn't. He built a merchant business from nothing, shipping, textiles, imports from the East. For a while, we were comfortable, not wealthy, but stable. What changed? A partner who wasn't what he seemed, investments that turned out to be fraudulent. My father trusted the wrong person, and it cost him everything. Senara's voice hardened. The man he trusted fled to the continent with our capital. Father spent years trying to recover, but the debts mounted. The creditors closed in. Eventually, there was nothing left. And after? After, he became a ghost of himself, quiet, defeated. He stopped planning, stopped dreaming. He sits in his study now, reading the same books over and over, waiting for something that never comes. She met Calum's eyes. That's the worst part of failure. Not the loss itself, but watching someone you love disappear inside their own shame. Calum was silent for a long moment. "My father was the opposite," he said finally. He never stopped planning, even when the plans were impossible. He'd draw up schemes for garden improvements, architectural renovations, charitable foundations, grand visions that kept him focused on the future instead of the present. That doesn't sound like a flaw. It was, in a way. He was so focused on what might be that he sometimes missed what was. Calum's voice dropped. "The last conversation we had was about crop rotation. I was impatient, distracted, and eager to return to London for some meeting I can't even remember now. He asked me to stay another day. I said no." The weight of those words hung between them. "You couldn't have known," Senara said softly. "That's what everyone says. It doesn't help." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. The meeting was about import tariffs, completely meaningless. And because of it, I wasn't there when he collapsed. I wasn't there when he called my name. I wasn't there. Senara rose without thinking, crossing to stand beside him. "Grief makes us believe we could have changed things," she said. "But we can't live backward. We can only carry the love forward." He turned to look at her, and she saw it. The raw pain he kept hidden beneath duty and control. The boy who'd lost his father, and the man who couldn't forgive himself for not being present. "You're very wise," he murmured. "I'm very tired. Wisdom and exhaustion look similar at this hour." A ghost of a smile crossed his features, unexpected and warming. "Thank you," he said, "for listening, for being here, for—" He trailed off, seeming uncertain. "For what?" "For making me feel less alone." The words hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. Senara should have retreated, should have reminded them both that this was an arrangement, a performance, nothing real. Instead, she placed her hand briefly on his arm. "You're not alone," she said. "Neither of us is. Not anymore." She left before either of them could acknowledge what that meant. But as she climbed the stairs to her borrowed room, Senara realized something had changed. The library conversations had stopped feeling like strategy sessions. They were beginning to feel like something else entirely. The Harrington Ball arrived like a storm on the horizon. For 6 weeks, Senara had prepared. New gowns, dancing lessons, Endless coaching from Odette on which families were allied with whom, which old scandals still carried weight, which matrons could destroy a reputation with a single raised eyebrow. The Dowager had set this ball as the deadline. Tonight, Senara would either prove herself or fail spectacularly. "You look magnificent," Odette declared, circling Senara in the dressing room. The gown was midnight blue silk that shimmered with embedded crystals, designed to catch candlelight and turn its wearer into something almost celestial. Madame Lefebvre had outdone herself. Senara's dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style that somehow managed to look effortless, threaded with tiny diamonds on loan from the Ravenmore collection. "I look like I'm pretending to be someone else," Senara murmured. "You look like a duchess." Odette squeezed her hands, which is rather the point. The Dowager appeared in the doorway, her gaze sweeping over Senara with the thoroughness of a general inspecting troops. "Adequate," she pronounced. From the Dowager, it was practically a standing ovation. The Harrington townhouse blazed with light, carriages queued for half a mile, footmen in elaborate livery manning every entrance. This was the event of the season, and everyone who mattered would be watching. Calum helped Senara from their carriage, his hand warm and steady around hers. "Remember," he murmured, "you belong here." "Do I?" "You're with me. That's all the belonging required." They entered together, and the whispers began immediately. Senara could feel them, the curious gazes, the fans fluttering to hide moving lips, the assessment and judgment from every direction. Lady Perpetua held court near the entrance, resplendent in ice-blue silk, her smile sharp as she watched them pass. "Your Grace." Lord Harrington appeared, all jovial welcome. "And Miss Wycliffe, we're delighted you could attend." "The pleasure is ours," Calum replied smoothly. "Miss Wycliffe has been eager to meet more of society's finest." And so it began. Introductions blurred together. Lord this, Lady that, the Countess of somewhere important. Senara smiled until her face ached, said all the right things, performed the role she'd rehearsed for weeks. But beneath the performance, she was watching, noting who seemed genuine and who wore masks as elaborate as her own, tracking Lady Perpetua's movements through the crowd, feeling the weight of the Dowager's gaze from across the ballroom. "The first waltz," Calum said, appearing at her elbow. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question. They took the floor together, and Senara felt the room's attention crystallize around them. The Duke of Ravenmore, dancing with the woman everyone was talking about. The 40-year-old, nobody who'd somehow captured his attention. "You're counting steps," Calum observed. "I'm trying not to humiliate myself." "Stop trying." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Just feel the music." She remembered similar advice from one of her mother's long-ago lessons. Trust your partner. Trust yourself. Everything else follows. She stopped counting. The world narrowed to movement and music, to the warmth of his hand against her back, to the way his eyes held hers with unexpected intensity. They turned across the floor with surprising grace, and for a moment, just a moment, Senara forgot that any of this was pretend. "You're beautiful," he said softly. "It's the gown." "It's not the gown." Before she could respond, the music ended. They separated with proper formality, but something lingered between them, an awareness that hadn't been there before. The evening continued. More dances, more conversations, more careful navigation of social waters filled with hidden currents. Senara found herself actually enjoying moments of it, particularly when Odette dragged her into a cluster of younger women who seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. Then Lady Perpetua struck. It happened during the supper interval, when small groups scattered through the Harrington Gardens for fresh air and private conversation. Senara had stepped onto a terrace alone, needing a moment of quiet. Miss Wycliffe. Perpetua's voice came from the shadows. Or should I say, the future Duchess of Ravenmore. Sonara turned slowly. Perpetua stood with 3 other women, Lady Millicent Vance, Mrs. Helena Crawford, and the Countess of Blackwood, all influential, all watching with barely concealed hostility. Lady Perpetua, ladies, we were just discussing your remarkable rise, Perpetua continued sweetly. It's quite the fairy tale, isn't it? A penniless spinster capturing the most eligible duke in England. Some might call it romantic, Sonara replied evenly. Some might call it suspicious. Lady Millicent's voice dripped with false concern. There are rumors, you know, that this engagement is merely a convenience, that His Grace needed an excuse to avoid certain expectations. Rumors are the currency of bored minds, and truth is the weapon of clear ones. Perpetua stepped closer. We know about your father's disgrace, your brother's debts, your family's complete lack of consequence. Does His Grace know the full extent of what he's attaching himself to? His Grace knows everything about me. Does he know that Edmund Fairfax still laughs about you at parties? That he calls you his most devoted failure? The spinster who thought a second son might actually marry down. The words hit like physical blows. Sonara felt the color drain from her face. 20 years of buried humiliation surging to the surface. I see that surprised you. Perpetua's smile widened. Edmund is a friend of my brother's. He tells the most amusing stories about the merchant's daughter, who actually believed. That's enough. The voice came from behind them, cold, controlled, absolutely furious. Calum stood on the terrace steps, his expression carved from ice. Beside him, the Dowager Duchess watched with an expression Sonara couldn't read. Your Grace. Perpetua's composure flickered. We were simply. I heard what you were doing. Calum descended the steps, positioning himself beside Sonara in a gesture that was unmistakably protective. Cruelty disguised as conversation. How predictable. I was merely ensuring Miss Wycliffe understood her position. Her position is at my side, which is more than you can claim. His voice carried across the terrace, drawing attention from nearby guests. Let me be perfectly clear, Lady Perpetua. Miss Wycliffe will be my wife. Anyone who insults her insults me. Anyone who threatens her will answer to the full weight of the Ravenmore title. Silence fell like a blade. Perpetua's face had gone white. The other women looked like they wished the terrace would swallow them whole. Your Grace, the Dowager spoke suddenly. Perhaps we should allow the ladies to return to the ball. I believe Miss Wycliffe needs a moment to recover. It was a dismissal, elegantly delivered. Perpetua and her companions fled with whatever dignity they could salvage. The Dowager turned to Sonara, her expression unreadable. You didn't crumble, she observed. I wanted to. But you didn't? Recognition dawned in the older woman's eyes. Not quite approval, but no longer active opposition. You stood your ground against 4 of society's sharpest tongues. That takes courage. I've had practice being attacked. Clearly. The Dowager glanced at her grandson, who still stood rigid with fury. Walk with Miss Wycliffe in the garden, Calum. She needs air, and you need to calm down before you do something regrettable. She swept back toward the ball, leaving them alone. I'm sorry, Calum said immediately. I should have been there sooner. I should have. You came. That's what matters. What she said about Edmund Fairfax is ancient history. Sonara's voice was steadier than she felt. A wound that healed long ago. It didn't look healed. She turned away, gazing into the darkened garden. Some wounds heal on the surface while staying raw underneath, but that doesn't mean they control us. Calum moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "I hope you know that. I'm stubborn. It's different." "No, it isn't." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You've faced down my grandmother, survived Lady Perpetua's cruelty, navigated a world designed to exclude you. And you've done it with grace and wit and fortitude I've rarely seen in anyone. Caitlin, I know this started as an arrangement." His voice dropped lower. "I know what we agreed, but somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like a performance to me." Sonara's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he took a breath, "I'm saying I don't want this to be pretend anymore." Before she could respond, voices approached from the ballroom. They stepped apart instinctively, putting proper distance between them. But the words hung in the darkness, impossible to unsay, and Sonara realized, with dawning wonder and alarm, that she didn't want it to be pretend anymore either. 3 days after the Harrington ball, Sonara found Caleb in the library at midnight. Neither of them had spoken about what happened on the terrace. They'd been careful, proper, maintaining the fiction while the truth burned between them unacknowledged. "You should be asleep," he said, without looking up from the book he wasn't really reading. "So should you." She closed the door behind her and crossed to the fireplace. The flames had burned low, casting the room in dancing shadows that made everything feel slightly unreal. "We need to talk about what you said." He set the book aside. "I was hoping you'd forgotten." "I haven't. Neither have you." Caleb rose slowly, moving toward her with the careful deliberation of someone approaching something dangerous. "I meant what I said. Every word." His voice was rough. "But I shouldn't have said it. Not there. Not like that." "Why not?" "Because it changes things. Because once something is spoken, it can't be taken back." He stopped an arm's length away. "Because you agreed to an arrangement, not a proposal, and I have no right to ask for more than what we agreed." "What if I want more?" The question hung between them like a held breath. "Sonara." Her name in his voice was different, softer, more intimate. "You don't know what you're saying." "I'm 40 years old. I know exactly what I'm saying." She stepped closer, closing the distance he'd so carefully maintained. "I've spent my entire life being practical, being cautious, and protecting myself from disappointment. And you know what it's gotten me. 20 years of loneliness. 20 years of watching life happen to other people while I stood on the sidelines being sensible. This isn't sensible," he warned. "No, it isn't." She met his eyes directly. "It's daunting and impossible and probably mad. But when I'm with you, when we talk in this library until dawn, I feel more alive than I have in years. And I don't want to give that up because I'm afraid of what might happen." Caleb's control visibly wavered. "You deserve better than a damaged man running from his grandmother's machinations. And you deserve better than a penniless spinster with a family full of failures." She smiled slightly. "Perhaps we're perfectly suited." "Sonara, tell me you don't feel it." Her voice softened. "Tell me these past weeks have meant nothing, and I'll walk away right now. We'll continue the arrangement as planned, and I'll never mention this again." He was silent for a long moment. Then his hand rose to cup her face, gentle as candlelight. "I can't tell you that," he murmured, "because it would be a lie. And we promised each other honesty." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Not the chaste, performative kisses they'd exchanged for society's benefit. This was real, his mouth on hers, gentle but insistent, tasting of whiskey and longing and something that felt like love. Her hands found his lapels, pulling him closer, his arms wrapped around her waist, drawing her against him until there was no distance left between them. The fire crackled, the clock ticked, and the world outside the library ceased to exist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Kylam rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. My grandmother will have opinions. She always does." He laughed softly, a real laugh, without bitterness or control. "You're not afraid of anything, are you?" "I'm afraid of everything." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." He kissed her again, brief, tender, full of promise. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll figure out what comes next. Together." "Together," she agreed. She left the library with his taste still on her lips and the exhilarating certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The blow came 3 days later. Sanara was dressing for afternoon calls when Fennec rushed in, her face pale with distress. "Miss, there's someone downstairs. A man. He's demanding to see you." "Who?" "He says his name is Edmund Fairfax." The name hit like ice water. Edmund. Here. After 20 years. She descended the stairs with carefully controlled steps, finding a man she barely recognized waiting in the entrance hall. Edmund had grown portly, his once handsome features blurred by age and indulgence. But his smile was the same. Charming, confident, completely insincere. "Sanara." He pronounced her name like he owned it. "Look at you, playing Duchess in a duke's house. What do you want, Edmund?" "So cold. I remember when you were warmer." He glanced around the hallway appreciatively. "You've done well for yourself." Though I must admit I was surprised. The Sanara I knew would never have pursued a man so aggressively. "I haven't pursued anyone." "That's not what people are saying." He stepped closer. "They're saying you trapped him somehow. That this engagement is a scheme, a fiction, a desperate grab for respectability. People say many things." "They do." Edmund's smile sharpened. "And they're going to say much more once I tell them about us." Sanara's blood ran cold. "There was no us. You abandoned me for an heiress without a word of explanation." "Ah, but that's not how I remember it. And memory, you know, is such a flexible thing." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "I have letters. Sanara. Letters you wrote me 20 years ago. Letters that express quite passionate sentiments. Those letters were private. They were foolish, naive, and now they're valuable." He tucked the paper away. "The Duke of Ravenmore is marrying a woman who threw herself at a second son, who wrote desperately of love and longing, who was publicly humiliated when that son chose money over her. How do you think society will respond?" "They'll respond by calling you a liar and a blackmailer." "Perhaps. But the damage will be done. Your reputation shattered. Your engagement ended. Your fantasy of becoming a duchess destroyed." His eyes glittered with malice. "Unless, of course, we come to an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" £10,000. A small price for a lifetime of security, don't you think?" Sanara stared at the man she'd once loved, the man who'd broken her heart, and apparently saved the evidence to use against her 2 decades later. "Get out," she said quietly. "I'll give you 3 days to find the money. After that, these letters go to Lady Perpetua's brother, who will ensure all of society knows exactly what kind of woman the Duke of Ravenmore chose." Edmund bowed mockingly. "It was lovely seeing you again, Sanara. You really should have married me when you had the chance." He left. Sanara stood in the entrance hall, her world crumbling around her. The letters were real. She remembered writing them. Young, foolish, desperately in love with a man who'd never deserved it. She'd poured her heart onto those pages, never imagining they'd become weapons. If society saw them, If Calum saw them, she couldn't stay. Couldn't face him with this hanging over them. Couldn't watch his expression change when he realized who she'd been, how pathetically she'd loved, how thoroughly she'd been discarded. It was the opera all over again. Edmund, choosing money over her, except this time, there was no graceful exit, no quiet disappearance into obscurity. This time, she'd finally found something worth having, and it was being torn away. She went to her room, packed her few original possessions, the burgundy gown, a handful of letters from her mother, the small items that were truly hers. She left everything else, the beautiful dresses, the borrowed jewels, the fantasy she'd briefly inhabited. Her letter to Calum took 6 attempts. Your Grace, I cannot explain, and I cannot stay. Something from my past has risen to threaten everything, and I won't let it touch you. Please don't look for me. What we had was beautiful, but it was always borrowed time. I'm returning to where I belong. Thank you for making me feel, even briefly, like I deserved more. Sonara. She left it on the library desk and slipped out through the servants' entrance. The carriage ride back to Margot's house felt endless. Her sister received her with worried questions and fluttering hands, but Sonara couldn't explain, could barely speak. She retreated to her small room and sat on the narrow bed that had once been her entire world. She should feel relieved. She'd escaped before the scandal broke, protected Calum from being dragged through the mud of her pathetic past. Instead, she felt as if she'd torn out her own heart and left it bleeding on the library floor. 4 days passed in gray silence. Sonara went through the motions of her old life, helping with meals, accompanying Margot on calls, pretending nothing had changed while everything had. She didn't sleep, could barely eat. Jumped at every knock, convinced it was someone delivering news of her disgrace. On the 5th day, Odette arrived. You impossible woman! Odette burst into Margot's parlor like a force of nature, fury and relief battling across her features. Do you have any idea what you've done? I did what I had to. You broke my brother's heart. He's been like a man possessed since he found your letter, tearing the house apart, demanding answers, refusing to eat or sleep or see anyone. Odette seized her hands. And I'm furious with you for running, but also worried because you're clearly in trouble and didn't trust us enough to help. It's not about trust. Edmund Fairfax. We know about Edmund Fairfax. Odette's voice softened. He came to Ravenmore House 2 days ago, tried to blackmail Calum directly, demanded £10,000, the same amount he'd asked from you, to keep your old letters private. Sonara's heart stopped. What happened? Calum threw him out. Physically. I've never seen my brother so angry. Then he bought every letter Edmund possessed, destroyed them publicly, and informed Edmund that if he ever spoke your name again, the Ravenmore family's solicitors would ensure he spent the rest of his life regretting it. The tears came without warning, hot, overwhelming, and unstoppable. He didn't care, Odette continued gently, about the letters, about your past, about any of it. The only thing he cared about was finding you, understanding why you left. I thought, Sonara's voice broke. I thought if he saw those letters, if he knew how pathetically I'd loved someone who discarded me, he already knew. Grandmother had investigators research your entire history within days of your arrival. The Fairfax situation was in the first report. He knew, and he didn't care. Because what happened to you 20 years ago isn't who you are. It's what was done to you. There's a difference. Odette squeezed her hands. He's in the carriage outside. He wanted to come in immediately, but I insisted on preparing you first. I can't face him. Not after I ran. You can. And you will. Because if you don't, I'll drag you out there myself, and that will be terribly undignified for everyone." Odette pulled her to her feet. "He loves you. Sonara actually loves you, and you love him. Stop being noble and go fix this." The front door opened. Kylum stood on the threshold, looking as destroyed as Sonara felt, dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. But his gaze, when it found her, held nothing but relief. "You're here," he breathed. "I'm here." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was fierce, desperate, saying everything words couldn't. She clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder, feeling his heart pound against her cheek. "Never do that again," he murmured against her hair. "Never run from me again." "I thought I was protecting you. I don't need protection. I need you." He pulled back enough to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Edmund Fairfax is nothing. Your past is nothing. The only thing that matters is what we build together. Calum, I'm 40 years old with a failed father and a gambling brother, and absolutely nothing to offer you. You offer me everything." His voice cracked. "You offer me honesty and courage and laughter and the first real happiness I've felt since my father died. You make me want to be present instead of merely existing. You make me believe that love isn't a weakness to be avoided, but a strength to be embraced." "Love?" The word was barely a whisper. "I love you, Sonara Wycliffe, completely, irrevocably. And if you try to leave again, I'll follow you, to the ends of the earth if necessary." She laughed through her tears. "That seems excessive. I'm a duke. Excess is expected." His expression grew serious. "Marry me. Not for arrangement or convenience or escape from my grandmother's schemes. Marry me because I love you, and you love me, and we're both too old to waste time pretending otherwise." Sonara looked at this man who'd defended her honor, destroyed her past, chased her across London, and declared his love in her sister's parlor, with no regard for propriety or audience. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times, yes. He kissed her then, deeply, thoroughly, as if sealing a vow. From somewhere behind them, Odette cheered. Margot made shocked noises. Margot's husband dropped whatever he'd been holding. Sonara didn't care. For the first time in 40 years, she'd stopped being sensible, and it felt like finally coming home. The Pemberton Ball was the social event of the season. 3 months after Sonara's return to Ravenmore House, 3 months of planning, announcements, and endless speculation, the ton gathered to witness the impossible, the Duke of Ravenmore's wedding ball. Sonara stood at the top of the grand staircase in a gown of deep sapphire silk, embroidered with silver thread and tiny diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. The Ravenmore sapphires adorned her throat, stones that had been worn by every duchess for 300 years. "Ready?" Calum stood beside her, magnificent in formal black, his eyes holding the warmth that only she ever saw. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled and offered his arm. Together, they descended the stairs. The whispers started immediately, but tonight they held a different quality. Wonder rather than scorn. Admiration rather than mockery. Lady Perpetua stood near the entrance, her expression sour as curdled milk. But she no longer mattered. Nothing she could say would touch them now. "The Duke and Duchess of Ravenmore," the major domo announced, and the room erupted in applause. Duchess. The title no longer felt borrowed. After 3 months of proving herself, navigating society with grace, supporting Calum's charitable work, winning over the most skeptical matrons through sheer persistence, Sonara had earned her place. Even the Dowager had relented, though she'd never admit it directly. "Adequate," she'd said at the wedding, which from her was practically a tearful blessing. The ball unfolded in a blur of congratulations and dances. Sanara found herself actually enjoying the attention, no longer anxious about judgment, secure in her position by Kylem's side. "You're glowing," Odette observed, appearing with champagne. "It's slightly nauseating. You're next, you know. Grandmother has her eye on Lord Pemberton's son." "Then grandmother can marry him herself," Odette grinned. "I'm holding out for a dramatic romance, preferably involving a forbidden love and at least one rescue at sea. The Aldrich family specializes in drama. We do, don't we?" Later, as the midnight hour approached, Calem pulled Sanara onto the terrace where they'd first declared their feelings. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box. "More jewelry? The sapphires are already excessive. This is different." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's. My father gave it to her on their wedding day. She wore it every day until she died." Sanara's eyes filled with tears. "Calem, my father kept it in his study afterward. I found it when we were sorting his effects." He slipped the ring onto her finger, above the elaborate engagement ring she already wore. "I want you to have it. A reminder that love, real love, is worth every risk. It's beautiful. You're beautiful." He kissed her softly. "And you're mine. And I'm the luckiest man in England." From inside the ballroom, music swelled. A waltz. The same waltz they danced at the Harrington Ball when everything had changed. "Dance with me," Calem said. "We've already danced 3 times. People will talk." "Let them talk." He pulled her close. "I want to spend the rest of my life dancing with you, Sanara Aldrich. I don't care who watches." They swayed together on the moonlit terrace, while London glittered below them. The whispers had never stopped, of course. Society still talked about the 40-year-old spinster who'd captured the Duke of Ravenmore. But the tone had shifted. Now they spoke of a love story, improbable, impossible, and romantic beyond measure. The woman everyone had pitied, the man everyone had wanted, and the match that had silenced every cruel voice that had ever laughed at her for being single at 40. 5 years later, Sanara sat in the Ravenmore library, her library now, surrounded by books and the happy chaos of family. Their daughter Elsinore, aged 3, was attempting to climb her father's leg while demanding a story. Their son Philip, just learning to walk, was being supervised by a watchful Odette, who had indeed married dramatically. A rescue at sea, just as she'd predicted. The dowager sat in her favorite chair, pretending to read, while secretly watching her great-grandchildren with an expression that might, in the right light, be mistaken for joy. In the corner, Sanara's brother sat reviewing estate documents, finally given purpose as Kylem's estate manager, his gambling days behind him. "Grandmother," Elsinore announced, abandoning her father to approach the dowager. "Tell me about when Papa met Mama." "Again?" The dowager's voice held no real complaint. "You've heard this story 100 times. I like it. It has a happy ending." Sanara met Calem's eyes across the room and smiled. Once, she'd been the woman they laughed at. The spinster, the failure, the desperate creature clinging to the edges of society. Now, she was the Duchess of Ravenmore. Mother. Wife. Mistress of a house that had finally begun to feel like home. The ending hadn't just been happy. It had been worth waiting 40 years to find. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness, despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you'd like more romance with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.